And I'll put the screen up. Let's see if I can find it here. Yes, there it is. Um, all right. Welcome. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Right. Right.
So I had said yesterday that I would try and show similarities between Hanukkah and Christmas. And before I do that, I think I would like to at least, because this is advertised as Torah, as Rashi and Chumash, I want to do at least one verse, and let's hope it'll still give me enough time to uh, to do what I said I would do. All right. So, v'hara'av haya al kol pnei haaretz, the the famine was over all the face of the earth.
Thank you.
Vayiftach Yosef et kol asher bahem, and Joseph opened up everything that was among them. Vayishbor lemitzrayim, and I'm going to say he sold to the Egyptians. Vayechazak hara'av be'eretz Mitzrayim, and the famine was strong it became stronger in the land of Egypt. It just took over everything. Okay. Al kol pnei haaretz, Rashi, right? Mi hem pnei haaretz. What do we mean by the face of the earth? Elu ha'ashirim. These are the wealthy people. In other words, it even affected them. Okay? Et kol asher bahem, amongst all who was amongst them, everything among them. Ketargumo di bahon ibura, the Aramaic translation, the Onkelos, okay, that ibura would be grain, right? Something produce that was everything. In other words, everything, all the produce that was there, it all was affected by the famine. Vayishbor leMitzrayim, he sold it to Egypt. Shever lashon mecher. So Rashi says that this word shever, right? Lishbor generally can mean to break, right? But he says this has the connotation of selling, right? Velashon kinyan, and also buying, acquiring. So the word shever has the connotation of um, buying and selling, or selling and buying, if we're going to go with Rashi's order. Ka mishamesh lashon mecher. So here in this context, it has the idea of selling. Shivru lanu me'at ochel lashon kinyan. So when it says, when Jacob says this to his sons, he says, "Buy for us a little bit of food," and there, of course, it has to do with the idea of buying. For altomar eno ki im betuah, and don't claim that this word shever only applies to produce. She'af bayayin v'chalav matzinu, because we find this word being used in connection with wine and milk, as in Isaiah 55. Ulechu v'shivru, go and buy, belo kesef, without money, uvelo mechir, without any transaction, without a purchase, so to speak, yayin v'chalav, go and purchase wine and milk. And here wine and milk has to do with Torah, with knowledge. But nevertheless, it says specifically wine and milk. So, before I move on to a different subject, I just want to give you an opportunity to react if you'd like to, if you have anything you'd like to add to what we just read, what we just covered. All right, I'm going to assume
There,
that. Yeah,
there,
go ahead,
there is
please.
something, Rabbi, in Professor Klein's book about the Hebrew language.
Yes.
He says that some people want to take the word shever,
Mm-hmm.
meaning to buy grain or to sell grain,
Mm-hmm.
as coming from the word bar, bet resh,
Yes.
meaning grain.
Yes.
Um, but he doesn't really accept that. He thinks it's, I don't know, I guess he thinks it's connected to the other meaning of shever, which,
Mm-hmm.
as you said, was to break.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and
What
when
did you
we
say I'm sorry, what did you say the other meaning was?
bar
To
means
break.
great. Yeah, and
To
bar
what?
means great. Sorry, go ahead, Sherry Beth. Go ahead. I'm
Oh,
interrupting you.
wait a minute. No, I'm sorry. I made a mistake. The first meaning of the shoresh is to break.
B-R-E-A-K.
Yes.
Yeah, to break. However, now I should have gotten my microphone glass out here. He says he thinks it's probably actually from the third meaning, which is a third meaning of this shoresh means corn or grain. Probably derived from shever, to break, and literally meaning broken or threshed. So, in order to eat the grain, you have to break it. So that it came to mean that which is broken, meaning grain. That's it. That's all I got about that. But I thought that was cool.
Right, and of course Rashi argues with that. He says don't say it only applies to grain, that it applies to any kind of purchase that's involved. So I don't know. Yeah.
I was thinking that Jacob sent gifts to Joseph, who was supposed to be the viceroy. He sent all kinds of gifts back to Egypt, thinking that maybe he won't ask for Benjamin. He's hoping he won't ask.
This is not what we're reading right now.
Oh.
No, we're anticipating that only comes up later on. We may get to it, but it's not in today's.
Sorry.
Right now. No, it's okay. It's all right. We'll catch the question or the point in its context. All right. So now I'm going to move on to what I said I would do, and that is a comparison and similarity between Chanukah and Christmas. So if we take a look at Chanukah and ask ourselves, what is Chanukah really about? What are the dynamics of Chanukah? This is how I understand them. What had happened was that the Greeks had polluted the temple, even set up a statue of Apollo, according to some stories, and taken this temple and dedicated it to an idol. Well, initially, the whole idea of the temple is that it was a nexus, that it was a connecting link between heaven and earth, and all that means, right? That the idea is that there was an ability to connect the divine into this world, and that is a great theme that has to do certainly with many religions, if not all, but certainly Judaism, and in terms of what the temple represented, was that it was a connecting point. That's, you've got the symbolism of Jerusalem, being the navel of the world, of the then known world, in its position between Asia, Europe, and Africa. But the very location of it, and the idea that this was, and the idea of the navel, right? That all of, that reality, blessing, all these things, that Jerusalem was this sort of this point at which all of this entered. It was that connecting point. And here,
well, who were the Maccabees?
let's just let me keep going, if you will. All right. So that they had experienced this, and of course, I think a big spiritual theme at that moment is rejection. The idea of divine rejection, that they were unworthy of this particular blessing, which was what you might even call it the ultimate blessing, and that they were no longer worthy for it, and that's why this had happened to them, and why the temple had become desecrated. So we do have the story of the Maccabees. They are essentially, that we're talking about Mattathias, who was a priest in Modin, and his 5 sons, and the band that they formed, and to try and ward off the tyranny of these Greeks, it was one of the three empires, part of the empire of Alexander the Great. Okay, and of course they were successful. That's what we read. That miraculously they were successful. And excuse
Come on
me,
in.
I have a dog that I have to get out
I
of my
have to,
room. Hold on a
I have to
second.
go. We can't. I'm gonna let you eat. Get going. I'm gonna have to go.
Reminds me of Doc Martin. Does anybody here watch Doc Martin? Got to get the dog out of there.
So I think I'm going to
Tell the
stop,
rabbi I
stop,
have to
stop the
go.
share.
I'm sorry, I can't stay. I have to
Okay.
get my eyes taken
Okay,
care of.
that's
Thank
okay, Harlan. You can check in
you.
this later on YouTube.
Bye,
Okay.
Harlan.
I
All right.
will.
Bye,
Thank
Harlan.
you.
Okay. Take care.
Bye
Happy
now.
Hanukkah.
Hi, Harlan.
Okay. Okay.
Bye.
So let me keep going with this. Right. So the Maccabees were successful.
You
Yes.
might want to mute
Yeah,
Harlan's computer if
I'm
it's
gonna-
still
Got
up.
it. Okay. So they were successful miraculously. I mean, here was a very small band that was successful against an an army of an empire. And so they were able to, of course, get back to the temple, and they see the temple basically desecrated and hardly in a situation where it's supposed to function the way it's supposed to function. And they still, I believe, uttermost in their mind, are wondering if this rejection, if they're still rejected. And so the miracle of the oil, that when they found this tiny little bit of pure oil that they could in fact use, and they lit the menorah, that when in fact the menorah remained alight to give them enough time, as the story goes, to create more oil for that lamp, because it was the purest of pure oil. It's like the first drop taken in the crushing of the olive. This had to be for them a sign of divine favor, and that in fact the temple was functioning the way it was supposed to function, and that God had not rejected them, and that in fact there still was this divine connection that they had. Now, if we look at Christmas, it is essentially the same idea. And that is the idea that the divine, that they understand that through Jesus, right? Through the birth of Jesus, they understand that it is a connection between the divine and this world that we live in. There's a wonderful statement that says, what Jesus represents to Christianity, Torah represents to Judaism. Right? It's not Moses, it's Torah. And the whole idea is that when we take Torah with all its rules and all its ideas and stuff like that, allows us to learn what it is to bring God into ourselves. And the temple itself is a metaphor for us as human beings to be able to bring divinity into ourselves. And of course, Jesus represents that divinity to Christians. So you bring divinity by performing the divine will, by identifying your very self with divine will. And so in that sense, both of them actually have a very similar notion. And of course, the Christmas tree and the Yule log, for those of you who are familiar with it, there's also a custom not only of the Christmas tree, which everybody knows about, but also the idea of taking this log and burning it, and the smoke from the log going up through the chimney into the heavens. Both trees and chimneys represent a nexus between heaven and earth, which again, right, is the temple, where the temple comes in. And the sacrifices, right, where you had the smoke of the sacrifices, etc., going up to heaven. You have that idea. You have both festivals occurring in the darkest time of the year. And the idea that despite how terrible things may be, there is that spark of divine presence that can sometimes happen at the darkest of times. And it is interesting that both occur on the 25th of the month, right? The first day of Hanukkah, 25th of Kislev. First day of Christmas occurs on the 25th of December. Maybe just a coincidence? I don't think so. And there's another connection too, and that is if you look at the dreidel and you look at the letters of the dreidel, Nun, Gimel, He, Shin, right? And I believe the dreidel actually and those letters came from outside of Israel, because in Israel it's Nun Gimel Hey Pei, but I don't think that's where the dreidel started, and I'll tell you why right now. Because if you take the letters Nun, 50, Gimel, 3, so that's 53, Hey is 5, so that's 58, and Shin is 300, so 358 if I'm keeping these numbers in my head, right? And you take the word Mashiach, right? Mem, 40, Shin is 300, Yud is 10, 350, and Chet is 8, 358. It's the same gematria. So that this dreidel, which probably has more symbolism than I'm capable of coming up with right now, right, is actually is a suggestive of that as well. Language is language, and sometimes we get caught up with language and don't realize that it's more a matter of trying to communicate ideas, and very often, the issue is how appealing those ideas are and how they strike our minds and how they strike our hearts. And sometimes you can express the exact same thought, but you can express it in one way that somehow touches people and reaches the inner place, and you can put it a different way and say exactly the same thing basically, and it doesn't touch them at all. And it could be that the metaphor of Jesus and the ideas that go along with a human being in that particular regard, touched more people, or touched people in a way that for the Jewish people, that is not the metaphor that appeals to us. That the idea of Torah and its laws and the idea of that spiritual discipline is something that appeals to us or to a group of people in a different kind of way. But I really do think that actually at the very basis, since they're both essentially talking about a time when the element of the divine origin of this world, of this universe, um, is able to make a connection with humanity and with people and with the world, is actually the same idea. And that's why I think Christmas and Hanukkah actually are both in very different ways giving the same message.
Love
And
it. Thank you so much. Wow. If you could see me right now, I'm sitting here with my mouth open. Thank you.
well, sadly, there's been a lot of blood spilled and a lot of anger and jealousy and stuff that has really messed up the ability to be open to the fact that we're all here to try and accomplish the same thing, which is to bring heaven down to earth.
And it's true that Jesus transmitted Torah also.
Yes, I mean that's not necessarily the way the Gospels, the Gospels have a different kind of message to give there, and especially when you come down to Paul and Paul's writings that are part of the New Testament, um, Paul takes a different stance about the idea of a religious discipline, and there's a fundamental argument, you might say, or debate regarding the idea of whether or not God cares whether we keep our dishes separate, etc., or whether those really aren't that important. From a Jewish perspective, being able to go into these particular details are the ways in which we actually demonstrate that we love God with all our hearts, with all our souls, and with all our might. And frankly, you look at the whole rabbinic enterprise, and the enterprise that takes that into account is actually the very heart of Judaism that
Um,
works both ways. Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to make another connection, and I think it's one that you had taught me about earlier, but that if, because maybe historically Jesus's birth date is questionable that it happened or debatable when it is, but let's say it is the December 25th, which is now used to commemorate his birth date. And then, of course, the 8th day would be January 1st,
Right.
which would be his bris date.
Yes.
And so at January 1st, which is, a celebration that you can connect to Jesus in that way, but also with the Hanukkah, I'm going a little bit further than what you had originally, with Hanukkah, and you're talking about the word, meaning dedication, but it's actually a time of rededicating the temple,
Yes.
not the original dedication.
Right.
So it's kind of like, Rabbi, you were saying whether you were worthy, and this is showing it's a little born againish to have the rededication. And so with Jesus's, the big celebration of the day of Jesus's bris, which is the day he would have been dedicated to God.
Yes.
In Judaism. So I see, various ways, and there's more to it, but that's the short version to connect those.
Christians celebrate that.
Yes, they do. It's in
do.
their
They
liturgical
yes.
calendar. If you
Right.
get a farmer's
Yes.
almanac and look at the calendar, the calendar part of the farmer's almanac, which represents a liturgical calendar, you'll see next to January 1st the words CIRC, standing for circumcision. And in fact, Tish Levy, I think, remembers Circumcision Day, that New Year's Day was called Circumcision Day. I need to add one other thing, that part of this connection with the divine is immortality. And as I mentioned right in one of our sessions just recently, how the circumcision ceremony, remember, with Joseph wanting the Egyptians to be circumcised, and how he wanted to give them that opportunity to become immortal? So likewise, within Jewish tradition, the idea of the divine entering into this world is also linked with the idea of immortality.
Yeah, and for people who bring the divine into this world through their practices, they are ensuring, at least from a specific perspective, some type of immortality.
Yes. I mean, there's a lot of what I would consider goodness involved in all of this that operates on a lot of different levels, not just on the spiritual level, but even on the pragmatic level.
I have a quick question about
Yes.
the dreidel.
Yes.
So you mentioned, the Moshiach, the numbers, but what's the connection to Christmas? Is it because, Jesus is considered, the divine entity, or okay? So
No,
that's
he's considered the Messiah. They considered
Messiah.
Jesus
Yeah.
the Messiah.
Right.
Yes.
So that's okay. You didn't spell that, but okay, I got
No,
it.
I'm glad you got me to spell it.
Yeah. Sorry. Okay,
No.
that's what I thought, but I just wanted to
Yes.
double. Okay, thanks.
Right. I'm just in my own mind, I'm trying to sort of puzzle out the idea of, the dreidel being, it's not, maybe this is just a, random thought that occurred to me right now, is the idea that we don't control it. That in a sense, we get the dreidel spinning, but what side it lands on is a purely, random, that's beyond our control. And so that there's this sort of little bit of a balance between the fact that the Maccabees got the dreidel spinning, right? But the fact that the dreidel landed, right, was up to the divine. Just a thought.
No, it's a great thought. The game of chance, right? So
Yes, exactly. That we don't control. That the elements that we don't control.
Yep.
So, yeah, no, I've played around with this for a while, as you can tell.
And the other connection is that all the Jewish composers who wrote Christmas songs, musicians who recorded Christmas albums.
I'm so glad you said that. Business is business, huh? That's the issue. Well, we do have a few minutes. If you want, we can go back to the the text, but given the timeliness of this, I did want to share that issue, and hopefully people find it interesting. So more to connect us than to divide us. All right, we'll take another verse. So what's happening now, by the way, in this back to the Joseph story, is that the screw is turning. The screw is turning, right? Because now, right through all these events, right, the brothers are going to have to show up again. That's the turning of the screw here. So, v'chol haaretz, now the entire land, Ba'u Mitzrayim, came to Egypt, lishbor el Yosef, to buy from Joseph. Ki chazak hara'av b'chol haaretz, because the famine was so great, was so strong in all the earth, in all the land. So let's take a look. So the syntax here is the Hebrew syntax is a little bit difficult. So Rashi's going to help us with this. V'chol haaretz ba'u Mitzrayim, and everyone in the land came to Egypt, El Yosef, to Joseph, Lishbor, to purchase, right, to trade, whatever. Ve'im tidreshehu kisidro, right, but if you in fact explain it, if you try to understand this as it in the order of the words given, right? So v'chol haaretz ba'u Mitzrayim el Yosef. Let's see. No, so notice he's got the word lishbor el Yosef, right? Anyway, hayat tzarich liktov, it should have actually written, if we want to understand it, the text should have written lishbor min Yosef, to buy from Joseph, not to buy to Joseph. In other words, so the way the Hebrew is actually written, the point that Rashi is saying is that it should have said v'chol haaretz ba'u Mitzrayim lishbor min Yosef, and in fact this is sort of out of order, and that you could read the sentence v'chol haaretz ba'u Mitzrayim el Yosef lishbor. Right? So that's what the point is that he's making here, that to really understand this sentence in a way, you have to either change a little word here or there, or flip it around. So here we go. So you see what I mean? V'chol haaretz ba'u Mitzrayim el Yosef lishbor. Right? So again, though, it's not so clear. What is the point, though? I understand what Rashi's saying, makes sense, but does he have another point, or does the Torah have some other point to make in the fact that it doesn't say it the way that might make sense? So again, I think that's sort of room now for us to think about and to see what that could mean, if there's any additional meaning in the fact that it's out of order. I'll take one more, the first verse of chapter 42. Here we go. Vayar Yaakov ki yesh shever b'Mitzrayim. So look at this. So there's the word shever, which would imply grain here, right? Or that they are maybe that they're trading in grain in Egypt, or trading in food in Egypt. So Jacob saw that there was shever in Mitzrayim, right? However we want to try and translate that. Vayomer Yaakov levanav, and so Jacob said to his sons, Lama tit ra'u. We could say from the word ra'ah, resh aleph hey, right? Why do you look at each other? Why are you looking at each other? But this sentence here is actually begging for interpretation, and given our time constraints, I'm going to simply put the bookmark in here, and put the little arrow in here as well. So let's do that, and we'll start with God's help tomorrow, right here, starting chapter 42. And I'm going to stop the share and stop the recording, and look forward to hope that people will enjoy this session.